to divide and conquer. People who want to incite violence, people who want society to be broken up. And the platforms that those people put communications out on are designed to increase their effectiveness and not increase the effectiveness of positive communications. And that's one of the biggest problems when we get into the real design of the back end of this technology. Now, before we go further into the discussion on kind of negative algorithms, we have to think about, okay, what are those algorithms based off of? Those algorithms are usually hundreds of variables of pieces of your data. It's data points that are collected about you and have been collected about you for your entire digital life. Some people that might only be 15 years or so, some people that's a lot longer depending on how early you engaged with the digital life. But from the first time that you started using a computer, you may have learned how to type, but nobody taught you what you were doing when you were touching each key. What does it mean to be sending someone an email or a text or to even send a private message on a social media platform? It means you're collecting or you're creating data that somebody else is collecting. Now, how many people in this room have read the terms and conditions of an app or a digital platform that you've downloaded lately? Yeah, some of you, but not too many. I spent nearly a decade in law school and I don't even read them all the time, but I try. So if you have read them, you'll notice that most of them are written in legalese. It means that there is a full intention on the people who have written those terms and conditions that if you decide to click that, it's going to be so long that you give up. And it's going to be written in a language that you basically don't understand the full extent of what you are agreeing to. Now, would you ever sit in your desk and get a pile of contracts sat in front of you and sit there and flip to the back page and sign, flip to the back page and sign? You would never do that with a physical contract. But that's what you do every time you visit a website and click OK to cookies. That's what you do every time you download an app and agree to their terms and conditions. You're signing a contract without reading it. And some of these contracts say things like, me, Facebook, I have the right to take all of your data unlimited. Every photo and message that you put out on my platform belongs to me, not you anymore. I have the right to turn on your camera. I have the right to turn on your microphone. I have the right to do that at any time without your secondary levels of consent. And how many people would have thought twice about using that platform if you actually read that in plain English? But you didn't read it, or if you did, you didn't understand that that's what you were agreeing to, because they've done that to manipulate you into saying yes. So what are the main issues about this? There's a couple of them. One is that I don't believe that if most of the world has not read the terms and conditions that you could really consider this informed consent. Informed consent is the legal term to say that you actually understand what you're consenting to before you agree. So that's one major legal flaw, I think, in our digital life. Second is transparency. So those terms and conditions should be really easy to read, and you should be forced to read them. Just a few bullet points. This is what we're going to collect from you. This is how. This is who we're going to share it with. This is what we're going to do with it. And if you don't want us to share it with all these people, toggle on and off who you want us to share it with and who not. Maybe you're happy to get sold a new car, but you don't want to get sold someone's political ideology, right? So you should have the ability to have transparency into what you're agreeing to and to have informed consent before you do that. Now, the next point that is my favorite and most important point is that the reason why you don't have transparency and consent is because in most places around the world, you do not own the data that you produce. In 2017, data was estimated to now be the world's most valuable resource, more valuable than oil and gas. It runs absolutely everything. If you run a company, even if you're not a data company, you are a data company because you hold data on your consumers and you hold personally identifiable information most of the time as well. So that means that you have collected people's digital assets with probably not very well-informed consent, and most companies around the world probably don't have very good data protection and security protocols and could get hacked at any time. That's people's personal information. But you don't know who has it, you don't know where it is, you don't know what it's being used for because you don't have the right to know that. Doesn't that seem completely insane that companies around the world might have your first name, middle name, last name, address, every address you've lived at since you were born, all of your parents' information, everywhere you went to school, everything you read, what you say in your private messages, who your friends are, what you spend your personal time doing. I could go on. But it's really insane when you think about it. Now, if data is the world's most valuable asset, then why do we have no rights to it? Most other assets around the world, especially referring back to the conversation that was just being had, like the world's most valuable natural resources, have always been stolen from people at first. They're stolen from the people who produce it or the landowners. And eventually, history starts to look at that as a wrong. And it eventually gets corrected, and we look back and think, why did we exploit those people? We need to give them back the rights to their resources. As the producers, all of us, as the producers of the most valuable asset in the world, why is this the only asset class where the producers have no rights to the value? Doesn't make any sense to me. In GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that went in on May 25th of last year in Europe, your data is now your property, but you don't have any legal recourse to fully get it back. You can ask for what people hold on you, but you can't really easily sue people for data hacks. We're getting there. You can't force people to protect your data. You can't force them to not share it with certain entities in a very easy way. And so we have a lot of improvements to be made. I've been working on a lot of legislation and policy, so is Tristan. So I think before we go into that, maybe we'll open it up a bit more.
Yeah, I kind of add to some things you said, which has been great. So I think my experience, by the way, when people used to talk about data was I would get really bored. I don't know if you guys feel that way sometimes because data is such a bland word. But if you think about data as the fuel for making predictions, so if you think about capitalism looking for new opportunities to create capital, looking for more efficiencies, we've already extracted from the present. We've already gotten so much of the value that exists from the present, but what if we could mine the future? What if we could forecast perfectly, increasingly perfectly, what's going to happen, and then sell access to change the future? So there's a great book by, how many people here know Shoshana Zuboff's book, Surveillance Capitalism? So this would be one other recommendation besides watching the film The Great Hack is this book, or listen to a podcast by her. But essentially her argument is that if you think about all the data that Brittany was just talking about, all the collections, right? How many people here think, or have had the experience, that they were talking with a friend about something, a pair of shoes, vacation, something, and then you open up the Facebook newsfeed and you see an ad for the thing you were just talking about? Okay, wow, that's a lot of people. So how many people here think that Facebook was listening to you on the microphone? Okay, I'm curious what your opinion is on this. But my data on this is that at least on iOS and the security forensics show that they're not listening on the microphone, and the VP of advertising at Facebook has guaranteed to me that they're not listening on the microphone. And this should be more alarming because the real point is that they don't have to listen to the microphone. I want you to get this. So if I have all this information about you, I can actually make such an accurate prediction. The point is, I don't have to listen to you. All I do is wake up the voodoo doll of you. I simulate what would be the conversations you're likely to have, and with increasing accuracy, I can predict accurately, and then sell you an ad for the thing that you're probably going to be talked about because we're that predictable. So I actually think there's two sides to something that's going on here. One is basically what's happening overall is the predictability of human beings and human behavior. And it's collapsing in from both sides, like if you know in Star Wars when the trash compactor is collapsing from both sides. So one side is that we're actually becoming more predictable because we're acting more impulsively. Because technology is making you more reactive, because it's making you more emotional. There's something called reflexive control. So creating a reflexive control loop where people respond exactly how you would want them to respond. So that's happening on one side. Shortening attention spans, more impulsive decisions, etc. The other side is, let's say we can't simplify your behavior, but let's say there's this complexity of what might happen next. So there you are, you leave this temple. Think about this moment. You're about to leave this temple and you could go anywhere. Where are you going to go? Do you know yet? You don't know. But if I have a supercomputer booted all of you that's been tracking all of the places that you've been going on the playa, and I've been tracking where all the other booted dolls on the playa have been going, I can wake up this booted doll of you and then simulate, I actually know you're about to go to the temple. And I might know that more accurately than you know that. So I'll give you, I just did a hearing for the US Senate. You can look at it online. And I made a list for the Congress members of all the things that computers can predict about us without people knowing about themselves. So computers can predict with 95% accuracy you're about to leave from a job and tell that to an employer. That's IBM's research. Computers can predict that you're gay before you might know that you're gay by looking at your eye movement patterns. Just putting different ads in front of you, noticing that certain people look more attractive to you than others. Computers can predict that you're pregnant before you know that you're pregnant based on the queries that you would do up until maybe some symptoms of feeling a certain way. You type that into Google 20 times and a lot of people type that in, so we know that you're pregnant. Computers also, if you don't know, with Cambridge Analytica, does anybody here know what the big 5 personality traits are? So in personality psychology, there's these 5 personality traits that were actually part of Cambridge Analytica's model. It's called OCEAN, O-C-E-A-N. So O is for openness, C is for conscientiousness, E is for extroversion, A is for agreeableness, and N is for neuroticism. And with those big 5 personality traits, I know something about how you're going to resonate with a particular message.
I also think that right now we are in this weird balance where technology is moving a lot faster than legislation and regulation. And I'm not going to say that to solve every problem, slap laws and regulation on it, but in this situation, goddamn, we're too late. So we need to work faster to make up for our lost time. So the fact that the most valuable asset in the world, in most countries on this planet, is not regulated and individuals do not own that, and companies that hold your personal information are not held accountable to any standards is completely shocking. I mean, we have lovely agencies that are working their ass off to protect us, like the Federal Election Commission, like, this might be unpopular to say here, but the SEC, the CFTC, the FTC are really, really working hard to try to figure this out. But unfortunately, most of the technologists are building technology. There's not a data science lead on every legislator's team. So even though there might be one technical person in every legislator's office, there also might not be, and that might not be a person that can explain to a legislator what is a predictive algorithm, what is a big data set, what does it mean when you think about negative and manipulative algorithms, what is a blockchain, which there's quite a few people in this camp that spend a lot of time telling legislators what that is. But that is where we're running into a problem right now. Actually, the reason I left Cambridge Analytica was to start a nonprofit lobbying group where we bring legislators and technologists together. Because to write these new rules and regulations, it's actually going to be technologists that have to decide what the policies are, because the legislators are not advanced enough and not building these things on a day-to-day basis. So it's large collaboration between the public and private sector that we actually need, which is, you know, it's important, but it's not happening enough these days. We're getting there because US Congress, British Parliament, the European Parliament are understanding how important this is for them to fully grasp what is going on and how easy it is for people to be abused. So one of my biggest policy recommendations in order to police the negative behavior is really for individuals to have a lot more control over how their data is used. And now, It's not going to be easy to change everybody's mind that they should care and start reading the terms and conditions. It's not going to be easy to develop scalable platforms where we own our data and we can easily pull our data sets back, actually have portable data or the right to delete. It's not going to be easy for people to believe that transparency or radical transparency is better than privacy. But I do believe that data science and AI will change the world and will cure most of our problems, or I never would have started working at a data science company. Imagine that we're all able to control our data in the future, and instead of in paper files around the country, we have our medical data, and instead we have our medical data on our phone, and we can decide to consent at any time to share that with researchers all around the world. You know how much longer we would have cancer? Not long. But you know, most medicines are created for 18 to 35-year-old young white men, who go in college to get extra money to medical trials. That's why women and minorities medicine doesn't work as well on us. It's because of a lack of access to data sets, because we are so scared of our data, like our healthcare data, being abused. So this is another conversation that I think is really important, which is, what is the value of privacy? If you want your privacy, you should be able to have it, definitely. I mean, nobody here has it now, I'm sorry to say. You lost your privacy long ago. But if you want privacy in the future, that's about consent. That's about you deciding whether you want to share your data with people for whatever purposes and get compensated for it or not. But really, privacy is a scaremongering tactic. It's saying that if you share your data with the world, it's going to be used against you. It's going to be used for something bad. So that's why you're scared and you want to keep it private. When really you could share data and we would no longer have traffic accidents, mass shootings, terrible diseases. And that's where I really think the future is. It's us consenting whether or not we want to donate our data to the good things in the world, or whether we want to be scared of its abuse. And so we have to put in as many obstacles as possible to that abuse taking place, so that transparency is enabled, so that we can use data for good. Because right now, I don't blame people that want their privacy, because I've seen how badly data can be abused, and that's a big problem. So if you think about an Airbnb model, this is my favorite example. You own your house or your apartment, right? Just like you should own your data. Data in the state of Wyoming and in the state of Minnesota is defined as your intangible personal property, so it's your property in at least 2 states. Hopefully by 2020 it will also be federal. But your house is your property, so if somebody wants to use your house on Airbnb, they tell you what they want to use it for. And then they agree on a price and they pay you before you hand them the keys. Why isn't our data just like that? I think that it can be. Thank you.
I'm being consistent. Hi friends. Really glad you guys are meeting. So my question is, it's very obvious moving into 2020 that it's impossible to have a free, fair, and open election, that there's going to be mass manipulation that's happening on a grand scale. We're already seeing it. So it's also really obvious to me that it's a problem of business models. And so my question is, what hope do we have? In my mind, Facebook could become a subscription-based model. It could raise enough funds from countries who can afford it, where it can be a lower cost subscription to third world countries where people are using Facebook. What hope do we have that these monolithic mega companies are going to have some sort of awakening and change things? And then if they don't, how screwed are we?
It's a great question. And the problem, just to be clear, is the business model. Because the business model is what sets up that extractive relationship. And so ultimately, that's what we have to change. But you're asking, so actually I'm glad you asked it because I wanted to get there. For the 2020 election, which is coming up very soon, I don't think that anything meaningful will pass as far as legislation between now and then. In fact, I'm pretty sure, 90% sure it won't. So that leaves us with public awareness, which is why I would really recommend that. Imagine the entire, I'll say this first and then I'll get to the global picture. If all the United States watched the film The Great Hack, so everyone understood what's going on, that would be a huge step. Back in the 1940s, the US was actually concerned about foreign fascist propaganda from abroad.
And the government actually had a couple institutions, one called the Institute for Propaganda Analysis, and the other called the Committee for National Morale, that actually, you might have seen these videos from 1947, it's called Don't Be a Sucker. And there's this like American white guy who gets up on a soapbox and starts saying, those immigrants, they're taking all of our jobs. And then someone's listening and starts nodding, and then a guy comes up behind him and puts his hand on his shoulder and says, son, that's fascist propaganda, and you shouldn't believe it. It's sort of like, the more you know. So we used to do that. We used to actually educate our population and say, watch out for this. And people think that they can't be persuaded. And that's the problem, is that we actually have to understand, people have to understand what they're up against. So the only thing that actually fits the timeline short term is, in terms of 2020 election in the US, is mass public awareness, unfortunately. We'd love to change the business model sooner than that, it's just not gonna happen. But in saying that, I also want to first also acknowledge this is a massively US-centric conversation. Let's talk about across the world. Facebook and Google create 2 billion Truman shows, 2 billion individual channels, perfectly tuned to you, where they're calculating stuff to dangle in front of your brain. And who calculates what's to dangle in front of your brain? It's not a human being, it's a computer. And they don't know what's coming through the pipe. And so think about a world where if you have, the Super Bowl, you have Janet Jackson on one side of the TV screen at the Super Bowl, and you have 60 million Americans in the other. There's a reason you have a 5-second TV delay in case there's a wardrobe malfunction. But what happens if you have 2 billion shows, 2 billion possible Janet Jacksons, and 2 billion individual viewers, and you don't know who or what is coming through the pipe? You don't know if it's Putin, you don't know if it's the 100 other dark companies that do this kind of dark manipulation. You can't actually monitor it you need human beings to look at it. And let's take a look at how many human beings work at these companies into the market. So there was an election in India recently. How many engineers at Facebook or YouTube do you think speak the 22 languages of India? So when we say this, and Facebook has hired, usually both of them have hired, about 10,000 content moderators, right? So that's like, let's hire a bunch of human reviewers to look at all the flagged content, look for the bad stuff, look for the propaganda, look for the negative stuff, and let's shut it down. But you hire 10,000 people to monitor 2 billion Truman shows in languages you don't speak. There's 4 fact checkers in Nigeria for a country of 24 million people on Facebook. So when you realize that the whole world is being tilted towards the kind of outrage machine, and each 2 billion Truman show generally wants to extremify wherever you start. And it's happening in languages the engineers don't speak. We actually need a systemic intervention. So the problem is I don't know how we can scale up a global public awareness campaign. So we just talked about the US, Watch the Great Hack, but we need like a global public awareness campaign. And the problem is that all the press is actually focused on the US conversations because that's what people care now. So in the long run, I think we can change the business model. We have to, and so that's where I go with that. But the environmental movement is kind of interesting as a related topic. It used to be that energy companies made more money the more energy you use, right? So they have a perverse incentive. If I'm PG&E or Con Edison, I want you to leave the lights on, leave the faucets on, just take as long a shower as you want because I just make way more money the more energy you waste. But that's a perverse incentive. We wouldn't want energy companies to make more money the more we destroy the environment. So we actually successfully went through what was called decoupling regulation, where energy companies make money based on how much energy you use up until a certain point, and then they start double charging you to disincentivize you from using more energy. But then that profit from double charging you doesn't go back into the company. It funds a regenerative energy fund to fund the transition to renewable energy infrastructure. So solar panels and everything else that I just talked about. So imagine something like that with technology, where we have to decouple the relationship between data collection and attention manipulation and profit. And that's models like that, I think, can be had, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we have to be changing from a kleptocratic model, which is take as much data from people as possible and monetize that on their behalf without sharing much with them besides access to the data scraping platform. But it's possible to not destroy companies around the world and still flip that business model. As I said before, I actually believe that the more data we produce, the more problems we can solve in the world. I know know not everybody is going to agree with that just yet until we have data security protocols and strong encryption methods around the world that are accessible and scalable. Totally get that. But there are ways to say, okay, these companies can start sharing some of the profits that they're making from however they're monetizing that, whether that's advertising or otherwise. If they are monetizing that data, they should share it with the individuals that have consented to sharing that data. So one of the things that I'm working on right now are very transparent terms and conditions where you are agreeing with whom you're going to share your data and for what reasons. And if you want to share that, then you get rewarded for that. If you decide not to share that, then that's fine. You can keep your privacy. Everyone should have that right to privacy. But if you can see for what purposes your data is going to be used, that could change a lot of things. And that's a lot easier for companies to implement than it is to say, okay, well, you can't use data in this way, or you're going to get cut off from the fire hose from all of your customers. I don't think that that is practical anytime soon. I don't see a near future where that's where we're going at all. I see strong security, transparency, consent, and the sharing of the monetizing of people's data. There are some, just to address the honest question about election manipulation and what we have to look forward to or not to look forward to between now and November 2020. Now there's a couple things that give me hope and a couple things that make me terrified. I'll start with the hopeful first. One is that Facebook has implemented some, although kind of surface level cosmetic changes, still awareness tools. Like you can now see if a photo or a video has been manipulated. So it actually shows you, it labels it to say that something has been manipulated. So that could be for a joke, or it could be to scare you into thinking something about someone that isn't actually true, like a candidate, for instance. So do look out for those labels. You can also see what is a political advertisement versus a commercial advertisement. So these are starting to provide you with the tools to be more informed yourself. If you see something that has been manipulated, if you see something is political, you can now think about that in a different way than you would to normal communication from a charity or a company selling you toothpaste or whatever that happens to be. And so it's really about awareness when you're on these platforms that some people are able to use these things for negative purposes and to be aware of them. There's some of the cosmetic fixes. Here are some of the things that scare me. Your colleague, Yael Eisenstadt, I recently sat on a panel with her at one of my film screenings in New York. She was in the CIA for a very long time, worked in cybersecurity and counterterrorism, and is an incredibly talented, amazing woman. And she was recruited by Facebook to become the head of elections integrity because of her skills. Now, although she didn't want to say yes to the job, she did because she thought, maybe I have the ability to change this from the inside out. After 6 months of Mark and Cheryl telling her no, 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 and no, we won't implement any of your suggestions, she quit and gave back all of the money in stock and joined Tristan's nonprofit to try to help fix the problem.
You can listen to her interview with us where she talks about her story on our podcast. It's called Your Undivided Attention.
So that's one of the things that absolutely terrifies me, that someone like that thought that she could help protect us before 2020 was told no, 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 and no, and had to quit after 6 months. That's disgusting. And so sad. Some of the other things that make me scared. A few of the people that I hired and trained at Cambridge Analytica have been running Trump 2020 since last March. And there's still 30 some odd people running for the other party, so I am not sure how quickly anyone's going to get their act together, but $1 million a day for the past 16 months or more has been spent on Facebook by the Trump campaign. There's now multiple super PACs, which can take any amount of money. And I don't know how many people in here read the Mueller report or watched Robert Mueller's testimony, but if you did, then you probably would have seen a few things. The obvious thing that he said is, one, the president has committed crimes. Two, there's likely a sealed indictment for him from the Department of Justice. and 3, that while he's a sitting president, he cannot be arrested. So, as someone who testified to the Mueller investigation and knows way too much about it, I would be absolutely terrified of someone that has used weapons-grade technology to suppress voters and drive people apart and incite violence, that person could go to jail if he loses this election. Think about that.
Just one thing to add on that. What do you think was the most recommended coverage of the Mueller report on YouTube? Russia.
Congratulating himself that he wasn't indicted.
It was Russia Today's coverage of the Mueller report. Because the Russian troll factory has been very effective at manipulating the YouTube recommendation system.
Thank you very much for your lecture, first of all. And my name is Anastasia, and I'm working on crisis management and post-crisis development in emerging economies. And that's why this topic is extremely important for me to elaborate on. And during your lecture, you mentioned the phrase, "we're becoming predictable." And my concern is, are we becoming predictable, or our train is trained to be predictable? At which stage are we right now? The data is being collected to make sure that there are certain patterns, or those patterns already used for us to follow specific rules in the social networks to get us to the point the companies want us to get to. Thank you.
Yeah. What I started here, you asking is where are we in the making ourselves predictable? So the problem with becoming fully predictable, especially if you totally sell the future to the algorithms, is that the future that someone would pay to have you do is not the future that solves climate change. It's not the future that causes us to be fulfilled. It's not the future that sends us to Burning Man. It's the future of consumption. It's the future of extraction. It's the future of manipulation. So I'd say a couple things. So I mean, when you think about self-control and the addiction side of it, like how predictable are we in addiction? So notice that most of us, if you go to Facebook to check that one Facebook event to figure out where that burner party is, and then you get sucked in for 20 minutes, that happens to us all the time. So you can kind of measure how predictable you are by measuring the lack of self-control you feel when you use technology. But I would bet you that you'll notice a very different relationship leaving here at Burning Man with your phone, especially for the first 48 hours. I think we all feel that. That's why we're here in a place like this, because coming here is reclaiming some sovereignty. You're calming down your nervous system, you're filling up your fuel tank. And I think we're guided less and less by moment-to-moment anxiety. So that's one side of the prediction funnel, is that impulsivity, the reactiveness, and that's decreased by the more human connection we have. So I think I'm optimistic that if technology instead reshuffled the choices on life's menu to make it easier to spend time with other people and have human connection and be at dinner tables, and made it a lot harder to be just doing the instant gratification, that we could actually reverse that trend if we had some help from, say, Apple, which would be really nice. The second side of it is that how predictable are we when it comes to the AIs predicting things about us? We mentioned the chess analogy. I want to mention one other one. I don't want to scare you, but there's this thing Facebook has called loyalty prediction. So loyalty prediction says, hey, you're a Facebook user, you're a mother, and I can tell Pampers, I can make a prediction about your voodoo doll, that you as a mother are about to become disloyal to a brand that I knew you were loyal to. And I can make that prediction, and then I can tap Pampers on the shoulder and say, hey, this user is about to become disloyal to you. Do you want to pay me so that I can get them to come back to you? Right? So it's a closed loop where our future is being colonized in a land grab for who can make the prediction and then sell access to it. And you can't have a vertically integrated market where the person that can make the prediction is also the person who sells access to control what the outcome is. And I think the metaphors from the financial regulation are very relevant here. You can't have insights. It's like insider trading. Like they're insider trading on your future. And you can't do that. That should be illegal. And the second thing, sort of related to the financial institution metaphor, is that this is a subprime attention economy, a subprime advertising economy. Because if you think about it, there's a great article called How Much of the Internet is Fake? 40% of users on the internet are fake. I think it's like 60% of clicks are fake. So think about it, we're selling fake clicks, fake users, and thinner fake slices of attention, like abstracted bits, shallower and thinner slices of attention. It's like packaging up into credit default swaps and selling them as if they're full-fledged blocks of attention. So actually advertising isn't nearly as profitable as it looks, and it'd be really nice to blow up the subprime attention economy and make it much less profitable. So that's another area.
Yes.
And to address the predictability. Now, if you own enough data on people, everybody is predictable. Nearly everything. If you own at least 2,000 like verifiable data points on people, you can build a model that is 95% accurate.
Wow.
That shouldn't be scary. It's just a reality. But what is scary is when you build persuadability models. That's the model that finds swing voters. And so people that are very high in persuadability, and everybody is different on that scale, people that are high in persuadability, you might be able to predict what they would do or what they would want, but you can also convince them to want or do something else. And that's where the main problem is, where you're finding that there is somebody that you can convince to do something they wouldn't otherwise do because you know enough about them to manipulate them. And is it manipulation or persuasion, and how negative or positive is that? It's very difficult to say that there's any difference between persuasion and manipulation. It just depends what you are persuading someone to do. As I said, it's benign to ask someone to buy a certain tube of toothpaste, perhaps, but it's maybe not benign to tell someone to support the NRA, right?
So I recently met Tristan at a digital detox retreat, and I'm guessing for many of you this is the longest you've gone without consistently working the phone. So I'm wondering, what do you suggest for people that are going back into the default world? You know, they're gonna be in line, just being like, I'm gonna check Facebook again. How can we approach that moment in a healthy way?
I think that we have to look in the mirror and realize that there's certain ways that we work, and the realities of social norms where you're expected to get back to an email or a message very quickly force us to be on the hook, pulling to refresh and getting back to people. But I think, one of the beautiful things about Burning Man or Shabbat or weekends is that everyone has nothing else to do at the same time. And it's one thing when everyone has nothing else to do at different times. So then we all go to our individual choices and distractions. But when everyone else has nothing to do at the same shared time, we actually are together. And I don't mean that in some blah blah new agey way. I mean, really, this is the thing, I think, why we're all here. So I think recognizing what are those shared spaces and shared moments that you can create in your life, that leaving here, knowing that you're going to fall back into the trap and you've still got the 1,000 engineers behind the screen trying to pull on your attention, how would you create those spaces and moments in your life and focus on that?
Yeah, I would say remaining aware at all times. If you've never read the terms and conditions of a digital platform you're using, do that for the first time. Read what you're actually agreeing to and see if you still want to trade in that convenience for giving away your privacy. Is that important enough to you? Do you need that app? Do you need to read or accept cookies in order to read the rest of that news article on that media's website? Think about that. Think about if you see a news article or an image, has it been manipulated? Is this fake news? Can I verify the facts in what I'm reading? Has somebody put this out here to anger me or to make me feel like there's me versus the others? Is this something that's put out, or is a tribal warfare communication, if you want to think of it that way? Think about that and start to change your habits. You will start to change your habits when you realize how many contracts you're signing and what you're signing away on a daily basis. We do have a future where we can be more protected, but it really takes everyone giving a shit. I love all of you, that you care and you have come here to listen to all of this. I actually apply gifts for all of you. They say on your data. So you can come up and get one after this, but it's caring. Call your legislators. You can write them, you can call them, you can email them, you can show up in DC at their office. I do that all the time, so does he. So as much or as little time as you have dedicated to showing the world that you care. And thank you.